The scream tore through the canyon air like a knife through silence, raw and desperate, carrying a terror that made animals scatter and birds take flight from their perches in the scrubby junipers clinging to the ravine walls. March of 1878 had brought unseasonably warm weather to Northern California, and the sun beat down mercilessly on the rocky terrain outside Chico, where gold seekers and ranchers still carved out their fortunes from the unforgiving land. Clara Whitman had been riding alone when her mare stumbled on loose shale near the canyon's edge, sending both horse and rider tumbling down the steep embankment. The mare had scrambled back up, frightened but unharmed, leaving Clara wedged between two boulders 15 feet below, her left ankle twisted at an angle that made bile rise in her throat every time she looked at it. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by waves of pain so intense she thought she might pass out, and the terrible realization that the trail above was rarely traveled. She could die here before anyone found her. She screamed again, pouring every ounce of strength into the sound, though her throat was already raw from previous attempts. The sun climbed higher, and she knew that exposure would kill her as surely as the injury if help did not come soon. Her canteen had tumbled away during the fall, landing somewhere out of reach, and the taste of copper filled her mouth from biting her lip against the pain. Cole Brennan had been tracking a stray from his herd for the better part of the morning, following hoofprints that led him away from his usual route, back to the ranch where he worked. At 26, he had spent the last 8 years working cattle across California and Nevada, a life that had hardened his body and sharpened his instincts. He knew these canyons well enough to be cautious near the edges, keeping his bay gelding well back from the crumbling rim. The scream brought him up short, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle in his saddle boot before he realized it was a woman's voice, not the war cry of a raider or the challenge of a rival cowhand. He dismounted in one smooth motion, ground tying his horse before moving carefully to the edge and peering down into the shadowed depths below. "Hello down there," he called, his voice carrying easily in the still air. "Can you hear me?" Clara had never heard sweeter words. "Yes, oh God, yes. I am trapped down here. My ankle is broken and I cannot climb out." Cole assessed the situation quickly, his eyes taking in the steep slope, the unstable shale, and the woman's precarious position wedged between the boulders. She was young, he could see that much, with dark hair that had come loose from its pins and a dress that was torn and dusty from the fall. Her face was pale with pain and fear, but her eyes were clear and focused on him with desperate hope. "I am coming down," he said, already uncoiling the rope from his saddle. "Stay still and try to stay calm. I will get you out of there." He secured one end of the rope to a sturdy pine growing back from the edge, testing his weight against it before beginning his descent. The shale shifted under his boots, sending small avalanches of rock skittering down past Clara, but he moved with practiced confidence, choosing his footing carefully and using the rope to control his descent. When he reached her level, he could see the full extent of her injury. Her ankle was clearly broken, the swelling already beginning to show through her torn stocking. She had wedged herself against the boulders to keep weight off the injured leg, and tears had cut clean tracks through the dust on her face. "My name is Cole," he said, his voice gentle as he crouched beside her, his presence solid and reassuring in the confined space. "Cole Brennan. I work at the Double R Ranch about 5 miles east of here." "Clara," she managed, her voice shaking. "Clara Whitman. I was riding back to Chico when my horse stumbled. I thought I was going to die down here." "You are not going to die," Cole said firmly, and something in his tone made her believe him. He had steady gray eyes that met hers directly, and capable hands that moved with gentle efficiency as he examined her ankle without touching it. "But I am not going to lie to you. Getting you back up is going to hurt like hell. That ankle needs to be stabilized before we move you, and I need to get you up to level ground so I can take you into town to see the doctor." Clara nodded, biting her lip. "Do what you need to do. I can bear it." Cole saw the determination in her eyes and felt a flicker of admiration. He had known plenty of women who would have been hysterical in her situation, but Clara Whitman had steel in her spine despite the fear and pain. He shrugged out of his vest and then his shirt, leaving him in his undershirt, and began tearing the shirt into strips. "I am going to splint this as best I can," he explained, looking around for suitable pieces of wood. He found two relatively straight branches that had tumbled down from above and broke them to length. "It is going to hurt when I position your leg, but I will be as quick as I can." Clara gripped the boulder beside her, her knuckles white. "I am ready." The pain when he straightened her leg and positioned the splints was excruciating, white-hot agony that made her vision gray at the edges and a cry tear from her throat, despite her best efforts to stay silent. But Cole worked quickly and efficiently, his hands gentle despite their size, wrapping the makeshift splints securely, and murmuring quiet words of encouragement that somehow penetrated the haze of pain. "The worst is over," he said when he finished, and Clara realized she was gripping his arm hard enough to leave marks. She released him immediately, embarrassed, but he just gave her a reassuring smile. "Now comes the tricky part. I cannot carry you up that slope. The shale is too unstable. But I can rig a harness and haul you up. It is going to be rough, and you need to try to keep that leg from banging against the rocks. However you can get me up, I trust you," Clara said, and meant it. There was something about this cowboy that inspired confidence, a quiet competence that spoke of a man who had faced challenges and overcome them. Cole fashioned a harness from his rope, creating a seat of sorts that would distribute her weight safely. He secured it around her carefully, checking and rechecking the knots before climbing back up to the rim. His gelding was well trained, and Cole used the horse's strength to help haul Clara up the treacherous slope, climbing down twice to help guide her around obstacles and keep her injured leg from catching on the rocks. By the time he pulled her over the edge and onto solid ground, they were both breathing hard, and Clara was trembling from pain and exhaustion. Cole brought his canteen and held it to her lips, letting her drink deeply of the cool water while he examined her in the full sunlight. She was beautiful, he realized with a start, even dusty and disheveled and clearly in pain. She had fine features and dark brown eyes that held intelligence and courage, and when she looked up at him with gratitude shining in those eyes, something shifted in his chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "If you had not come along, I would have died down there." "I am just glad I heard you," Cole said gruffly, unsettled by his reaction to her. He had known plenty of pretty women in his years on the trail, but none who had affected him quite like this. He stood abruptly, moving to his horse. "We need to get you to the doctor in Chico. Can you ride if I hold you?" Clara looked at the tall gelding and then down at her splinted ankle, doubt crossing her face. But she nodded, setting her jaw. "If you can get me up there, I can hold on." It took some maneuvering, but Cole finally settled her in front of him on the saddle, her injured leg positioned carefully to avoid the worst jolts, his arm firm around her waist to keep her secure. Clara leaned back against his chest, too exhausted and in too much pain to worry about propriety, and felt his solidity and warmth surrounding her like a shelter. The ride to Chico took nearly an hour, following trails that Cole knew would give the smoothest passage. He kept the gelding to a careful walk, hyper-aware of the woman in his arms, the way her hair smelled of lavender despite the dust, the small sounds of pain she tried to suppress, when the horse's movement jarred her ankle. He found himself talking to her, partly to keep her conscious and alert, partly because he wanted to know more about her. "What were you doing riding out there alone?" he asked, as they followed a creek bed that would lead them toward the town. "I teach at the school in Chico," Clara explained, her voice strained but steady. "I had gone to visit one of my students who lives on a ranch about 3 miles out. Her mother asked me to stay for lunch, and I left later than I should have. I was taking what I thought was a shortcut back when my mare spooked at something and stumbled." "A teacher," Cole said, and Clara could hear the respect in his voice. "That explains the steel in your spine. I imagine you need it, dealing with a classroom full of children." Despite everything, Clara found herself smiling. "They can be challenging, but I love it. I came to Chico 2 years ago from Sacramento after my parents died. My father was a minister, and he believed strongly in the power of education. Teaching seemed like a way to honor his memory." "I am sorry about your parents," Cole said quietly, and Clara could hear that he meant it. "Thank you. It was difficult, but I have built a good life here. I have a small house near the school, and the town has been welcoming." She paused, then added, "What about you?" "Have you always worked at the Double R?" "I have been there about 3 years now," Cole said. "Before that, I worked ranches all over California and Nevada. My father was a cowboy too, spent his whole life on the trail. He died when I was 18, thrown from a horse during a stampede. My mother had already passed some years before, so I just kept doing what I knew. The Double R foreman, Jack Patterson, he took me on and taught me everything about running a good operation. It is the closest thing to a home I have had in a long time." Clara heard something wistful in his voice and twisted slightly to look up at him, ignoring the protest from her ankle. "Do you ever think about settling down, having a place of your own?" Cole met her eyes, and for a moment the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, the horse moving beneath them forgotten. "I have been thinking about it more lately," he admitted. "Saving my wages, looking at land. A man gets tired of drifting after a while." They were interrupted by the sight of Chico appearing in the distance, the buildings of the growing town rising from the valley floor. Chico had been founded back in the 1840s and had grown prosperous from the gold rush, and now from agriculture and ranching. The main street boasted a general store, a saloon, a church, and importantly, a doctor's office. Cole guided the gelding straight to the doctor's house, a neat white building on the edge of town. Dr. Samuel Henderson was in his garden when they arrived, and he hurried over immediately when he saw Clara's condition. "Good Lord, what happened?" the doctor asked, his practiced eye already assessing the injury as Cole dismounted and carefully lifted Clara down from the saddle. "She fell into a ravine and broke her ankle," Cole explained, carrying Clara easily despite her protests that she could hobble. "I splinted it as best I could, but she needs proper medical attention." Dr. Henderson, a gray-haired man in his 50s with kind eyes, nodded approvingly at Cole's work as he directed them into his examination room. "You did well with that splint, young man. Likely saved her from a lot worse damage. Now, let me get a proper look at this." Cole hesitated in the doorway, suddenly unsure of his place. Clara reached out and caught his hand, her grip tight. "Please stay," she said, and he could see the fear in her eyes now that the immediate crisis was past, and she was facing the reality of the injury. "I will be right here," Cole promised, settling into a chair against the wall while the doctor went to work. The examination was thorough and painful, and Clara gripped the edges of the examination table hard enough to make her hands ache. Dr. Henderson was gentle but methodical, and his verdict was both reassuring and concerning. "It is a clean break," he said as he began to apply a proper cast made of plaster bandages, a relatively new technique that was far superior to the old methods. No bone fragments that I can feel, which is very good news. But you are going to be off that leg for at least 6 weeks, possibly 8. No weight bearing at all for the first 4 weeks, and then we will see how the healing is progressing. You will need crutches, and you will need help for a while. Clara's face fell. 6 weeks. But the school, my students, will have to make do with a substitute teacher, Dr. Henderson said firmly. Miss Whitman, if you do not let this heal properly, you could end up with a permanent limp or worse. I know it is difficult, but you must rest and let the bone knit. After the doctor finished and gave Clara a dose of laudanum for the pain, Cole helped her into the doctor's spare room to rest while he went to inform the school board and arrange for her things to be brought from her house. Clara protested that he had already done more than enough, that she could not impose on him further, but Cole waved away her concerns. You cannot get around on your own yet, and I am not about to leave you stranded, he said simply. Besides, I want to make sure you are settled properly before I head back to the ranch. He spent the rest of the afternoon handling the practical matters that Clara could not manage herself. He spoke with the head of the school board, a stern woman named Mrs. Patterson, who happened to be the ranch foreman's wife, and who promised to arrange for a substitute teacher. He collected Clara's personal belongings from her small house, carefully packing her clothes and books into the saddlebags and a borrowed trunk. He even stopped by the general store to purchase the crutches Dr. Henderson had prescribed, and a few supplies he thought she might need. When he returned to the doctor's house, he found Clara awake but groggy from the laudanum, sitting in a chair with her casted leg propped on a stool. Her face brightened when she saw him, and Cole felt that strange sensation in his chest again. You did not have to do all this, Clara said as he set down her belongings. I have already imposed on you terribly. It was no imposition, Cole said, and realized he meant it. He had enjoyed the afternoon, strange as that seemed, taking care of things for her. It felt right somehow, looking after this brave, determined woman who had faced her injury with such courage. Dr. Henderson appeared with a pot of tea and some sandwiches, and the three of them sat together as evening fell over Chico. The doctor explained that Clara could stay in his spare room for a few days until she was more mobile, and then he would help arrange for her to return to her own house with someone to check on her daily. I can do that, Cole heard himself say before he had fully thought it through. I mean, I can ride in from the ranch to check on her. It is not that far out of my way. Clara and the doctor both looked at him in surprise, and Cole felt his ears grow hot. But he pressed on. I know the foreman will give me the time. His wife is head of the school board, and she will want to make sure Miss Whitman is properly cared for, and I would feel better knowing someone is looking in on her regular. That is very kind of you, Mr. Brennan, Clara said softly, her eyes searching his face. But I cannot ask you to disrupt your life for me. You are not asking. I am offering, Cole said firmly. You would have died in that ravine if I had not happened by. Seems to me that makes you my responsibility, at least until you are back on your feet. It was settled, though Clara continued to protest weakly. Cole would return to the ranch that night but would ride into Chico every few days to check on her, and once she was settled back in her own house, he would stop by daily to make sure she had what she needed. As Cole prepared to leave, Clara reached out and caught his hand again. I do not know how to thank you properly, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You saved my life today, and you have shown me such kindness. I will not forget it. Cole looked down at their joined hands, her small one engulfed in his work-roughened palm, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. I am just glad I was there when you needed help, he said quietly. You rest now and heal. I will be back day after tomorrow to see how you are doing." The ride back to the Double R in the darkness gave Cole plenty of time to think about the day's events and about Clara Whitman. He had been around women before, had even fancied himself in love a time or two in his younger days, but this felt different. There was something about Clara that drew him, and not just her pretty face. It was her courage, her determination, the intelligence in her eyes and the steel in her spine. He found himself already counting the hours until he could see her again. Over the next 2 weeks, Cole became a familiar sight in Chico, riding in every other day at first and then, as Clara settled back into her own house, making the journey daily. He would arrive in the late afternoon after his work at the ranch was done, bringing supplies or just checking to make sure she had everything she needed. He repaired the loose board on her front steps, fixed the squeaky hinge on her gate, and built a rail on her porch so she could navigate the steps more safely with her crutches. Clara found herself watching for him every day, her heart lifting when she saw him ride up on his bay gelding. They fell into an easy pattern, Cole helping her with tasks she could not manage on her own, then sitting with her on the porch as the evening cooled, talking about everything and nothing. She learned that he could read and write, unusual for a cowboy, because his mother had been a schoolteacher before she married. She learned that he had a dry sense of humor and a deep knowledge of the land and animals that came from years of close observation. Cole learned that Clara had a quick wit and a passion for teaching that made her eyes light up when she talked about her students. He learned that she loved poetry and could recite long passages from memory, her voice bringing the words to life. He learned that she was stubborn and independent, sometimes to a fault, but that she had a soft heart that felt things deeply. They were falling in love, though neither spoke the words aloud. It happened in the quiet moments, in the comfortable silences, in the way Cole's hand would linger on Clara's when he helped her up from her chair, in the way Clara's eyes would follow him as he worked on the small repairs around her house. The town noticed, of course. Chico was small enough that any new romance was fodder for gossip, and the sight of the quiet cowboy courting the schoolteacher became a source of much speculation and approval. Mrs. Patterson stopped by one afternoon with a basket of muffins and a knowing smile. "He is a good man, that Cole Brennan," she said as she sat with Clara on the porch. "My husband thinks very highly of him, says he has more integrity in his little finger than most men have in their whole body, and it is clear he has feelings for you." Clara felt her cheeks heat. "He has been very kind, helping me while I recover." "Kind," Mrs. Patterson repeated with a laugh. "My dear, that man rides 10 miles round trip every day to see you and works on your house like it is his own. That is not just kindness. That is a man who is courting you properly, even if he has not said the words yet." After Mrs. Patterson left, Clara sat thinking about her words. She knew the older woman was right, could feel it in the way her heart raced when Cole arrived, in the way the days felt empty when he was gone. She was falling in love with him, had been since the moment he climbed down into that ravine to save her. But what did he truly feel? Was Mrs. Patterson right, or was Cole simply a kind man doing his duty? That evening when Cole arrived, Clara was waiting on the porch with a special supper she had managed to prepare despite her limited mobility. She had asked her neighbor, a sweet elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, who had immigrated from China and opened a small restaurant in town, to help her cook a proper meal, and the table was set with her best dishes. Cole stopped short when he saw the spread, surprise and pleasure crossing his face. "What is all this?" "A thank you," Clara said simply. "You have done so much for me these past weeks, and I wanted to do something for you in return." "I know it is not much, but it is perfect," Cole interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. He removed his hat and hung it carefully on the peg by the door, then helped Clara to her seat before taking his own across from her. The meal was delicious, a blend of traditional American fare and some of the Chinese dishes Mrs. Chen had taught Clara to make. They ate slowly, savoring both the food and the companionship, and when they were finished, Cole helped Clara back to the porch where they sat watching the sun set over the distant mountains. "Clara," Cole said finally, his voice serious, "I need to tell you something, and I am not sure I have the right words for it." Clara's heart began to pound. "What is it?" Cole turned to face her, his gray eyes intense in the fading light. "These past weeks, getting to know you, spending time with you, it has meant more to me than I can properly express. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met. You are strong and smart and brave, and when I am with you, I feel like I have found something I did not even know I was looking for." "Cole," Clara whispered, her eyes shining with tears. "I know I am just a cowboy," Cole continued, the words coming faster now as if he was afraid he would lose his courage if he stopped. "I do not have much to offer except hard work and honesty. But I have been saving my wages for years now, and I have enough to buy a piece of land. I have been looking at a parcel just outside of town, good grazing land with a creek running through it. I could build a house there, start my own herd. It would be a hard life at first, but I would work myself to the bone to make it succeed." He took her hand, holding it gently in both of his. "What I am trying to say, and doing a poor job of it, is that I am falling in love with you, Clara Whitman. I think I started falling that first moment I looked down into that ravine and saw you looking back up at me with such courage in your eyes. And if you think you could feel the same way about a rough cowboy like me, I would count myself the luckiest man alive." Clara was crying openly now, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Oh, Cole, I have been in love with you for weeks now. I was just afraid to say it, afraid you might not feel the same way. You are not just a cowboy, you are the kindest, most honorable man I have ever known. You saved my life, and then you stayed and made my life better in every way. I would be proud to stand beside you, no matter how hard the work might be." Cole stood and pulled her gently to her feet, mindful of her injured ankle. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears, and then he kissed her. It was soft and sweet and full of all the emotions they had been holding back, and when they finally parted, both were breathless. "I will do right by you," Cole promised. "I will speak to the Reverend and we can have a proper courtship. I know you need to heal first and I want to do this the right way. But when you are ready, I would be honored if you would agree to be my wife." "Yes," Clara said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes to all of it. To the courtship and to marrying you when the time is right. I cannot think of anything I want more." They sat together on the porch until full dark, making plans and dreaming about their future. Cole told her about the land he had been looking at, describing the rolling hills and the stand of oak trees where he thought a house should be built. Clara talked about how she could continue teaching, at least until they had children, and how she wanted to fill their home with books and music and laughter. The next months passed in a blur of healing and courtship. Clara's ankle mended slowly but surely, and by the end of 6 weeks, Dr. Henderson proclaimed her fully healed, though she would need to be careful not to re-injure it. Cole formally asked permission from the Reverend to court Clara, a formality since the whole town already knew about their romance, and they began appearing together at church socials and town events. Cole purchased the land he had been eyeing, a beautiful 100 acres with good water and grass. He began building a house on it, working every spare moment he had, and the men from the Double R Ranch often came to help on their days off. It was a solid, well-built structure with 3 bedrooms, a large kitchen that made Clara's eyes light up when she saw it, and a wide porch that overlooked the valley. They were married in September of 1878, in the small church in Chico with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Clara wore a dress of cream silk that Mrs. Patterson had helped her sew, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Cole wore a new suit that was stiff and uncomfortable, but he endured it gladly because of the way Clara looked at him when she came down the aisle on the arm of Dr. Henderson, who had agreed to give her away. The vows they spoke were traditional, but the emotion behind them was deeply personal. When Cole promised to love and cherish Clara for all his days, his voice was thick with feeling, and when Clara promised to honor and support Cole through whatever came, she meant every word with her whole heart. The reception was held at the schoolhouse, with tables laden with food that the townspeople had contributed. There was music and dancing, and Cole proved to be surprisingly graceful despite his claim that he had 2 left feet. He swept Clara around the floor while the fiddler played, and when she laughed up at him with pure joy, he felt his heart might burst from happiness. They spent their wedding night in their new home, the house Cole had built with his own hands. He carried Clara over the threshold, and they stood together in the kitchen, looking around at the beginning of their life together. "It is perfect," Clara said, turning in his arms to kiss him. "Everything is perfect." Their first year of marriage was filled with hard work and deep happiness. Cole continued working at the Double R while building up his own herd, using his savings to purchase good breeding stock. Clara returned to teaching, though she cut back her hours to help with the ranch work when she could. She discovered she had a talent for working with the horses, and she and Cole would spend evenings training the young colts together. The land prospered under their care. Cole had a natural instinct for ranching, knowing when to move the cattle to fresh pasture, how to conserve water during the dry months, and which calves to keep for breeding. Clara kept meticulous records of their expenses and income, her teacher's mind well suited to the organizational demands of running a ranch. But beyond the work, it was the small moments of daily life that made their marriage rich. The way Cole would bring Clara wildflowers he found on his rides. The way Clara would read poetry to him in the evenings while he mended tack. The quiet conversations over breakfast, making plans and sharing dreams. The passion they discovered in each other's arms, a deep physical connection that grew stronger as they learned each other's bodies and hearts. In the spring of 1879, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She told Cole one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, a ritual they had maintained since their courting days. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for, pure joy mixed with tender concern for her well-being. "A baby," he kept repeating, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Clara asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Cole said, pulling her close. "You have given me everything, Clara. A home, a purpose, love, and now a child. I am the luckiest man who ever lived." The pregnancy was not easy. Clara suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and Cole would hold her hair and rub her back, hating that he could not do more to ease her discomfort. But Dr. Henderson assured them that it was normal, and as Clara entered her second trimester, the sickness faded and was replaced by a blooming health that made her more beautiful than ever in Cole's eyes. Cole became almost comically protective, wanting to wrap Clara in cotton wool and not let her lift a finger. Clara, stubborn and independent as always, refused to be coddled, insisting that she was pregnant, not fragile. They found a compromise, with Clara continuing to help with lighter ranch work and her teaching while letting Cole handle the heavier tasks. The whole town seemed invested in the pregnancy. Mrs. Patterson organized a quilting bee to make baby blankets. Mrs. Chen brought special soups that she promised would ensure a healthy baby. Even the rough cowboys from the Double R would ask Cole shyly about how Clara was feeling and offer awkward congratulations. In November of 1879, on a cold night with the first frost sparkling on the ground, Clara went into labor. Cole rode like the devil himself was chasing him to fetch Dr. Henderson, and then paced the kitchen like a caged animal while the doctor and Mrs. Patterson attended to Clara in the bedroom. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Cole wore a path in the kitchen floor with his pacing, jumping every time he heard Clara cry out, feeling helpless and terrified. Mrs. Patterson came out once to reassure him that everything was progressing normally, but her words did little to calm his racing heart. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, he heard the most beautiful sound in the world, the thin, indignant wail of a newborn baby. Moments later, Mrs. Patterson emerged with a smile on her tired face. "You have a son," she announced. "A big, healthy boy with a good set of lungs on him. And Clara is tired but doing well. You can go in and see them now." Cole entered the bedroom on shaking legs. Clara was propped up against the pillows, pale and exhausted but with a radiant smile on her face. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the quilts the town had made. Dr. Henderson was packing up his instruments, and he clapped Cole on the shoulder as he passed. "You have a fine family there, son," the doctor said warmly. "Take good care of them." Cole approached the bed slowly, his eyes fixed on his wife and child. Clara looked up at him with tears in her eyes and held out the bundle. "Meet your son," she said softly. Cole took the baby with trembling hands, marveling at how tiny and perfect he was. The infant had a shock of dark hair and a red, wrinkled face, and when he opened his eyes, they were a slate gray that might turn brown or might stay the same color as his father's. Cole felt something crack open in his chest, a love so fierce and overwhelming it brought tears to his eyes. "He is perfect," Cole whispered, his voice breaking. "You are perfect. I love you both so much." They named him William, after Cole's father, with the middle name Samuel after the doctor who had brought him safely into the world. William Brennan proved to be a strong, healthy baby with his mother's determination and his father's calm temperament. He rarely cried except when hungry, and he seemed content to watch the world around him with solemn, curious eyes. Cole took to fatherhood with the same quiet competence he brought to everything else. He would walk the floor with William in the middle of the night, singing old cowboy songs in his rough voice to soothe the baby back to sleep. He built a cradle with his own hands, smooth and sturdy, with intricate carvings of horses and cattle on the headboard. He was tender and gentle with his son, and watching him with the baby made Clara fall in love with him all over again. Clara proved to be a natural mother, though she freely admitted to being terrified at first. She nursed William and sang to him, and read to him from her beloved books of poetry, even though he was far too young to understand the words. She had decided to take a year away from teaching to focus on William, and while she sometimes missed her students, she treasured these early months with her son. The ranch continued to prosper. Cole had hired a young man named Tom to help with the cattle work, allowing him more time at the house with Clara and William. The herd had grown substantially, and they were earning a good income from selling beef to the army posts and to the growing populations in the California towns. Life settled into a rhythm of work and family. William grew from a tiny infant into a plump, happy baby who smiled readily and was reaching for everything within his grasp. He took his first steps on a warm day in June of 1880, tottering from Clara's arms into Cole's with a look of surprised delight on his little face. In the fall of 1881, Clara discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, with less sickness and more energy. She had returned to part-time teaching when William was old enough, and she continued working until she was well into her 7th month, much to Cole's consternation. Their second child, a daughter they named Margaret Rose, was born in April of 1882. Her birth was quicker and easier than William's had been, and when Cole held his daughter for the first time, he was amazed by how tiny and delicate she seemed compared to his sturdy son. Margaret had Clara's dark hair and what would turn out to be her mother's brown eyes, and she wrapped her father around her little finger from the first moment. William, not quite 2.5 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would sit beside her cradle for hours, talking to her in his toddler babble and very seriously showing her his toys. Clara and Cole would watch their children together and marvel at the life they had built. The years passed in a blur of growth and change. William grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working alongside his father with the cattle and horses. Margaret was bright and spirited, with her mother's love of learning and her father's quiet determination. In 1884, they were joined by another son, James Cole, and in 1886 by another daughter, Catherine Ann. The ranch had grown substantially. Cole had been able to purchase additional land, and they now ran several hundred head of cattle. They had built a proper barn and added on to the house, creating more bedrooms for their growing family and a study where Clara could work on her writing. She had begun contributing articles to a San Francisco newspaper about life on a ranch, and her vivid descriptions and engaging style had earned her a small but devoted following. Cole had become a respected figure in the ranching community, known for his integrity and his skill with both cattle and horses. He served on the local Cattlemen's Association and was often called upon to help settle disputes or offer advice to younger ranchers just starting out. But despite their success and their growing family, Clara and Cole never lost sight of what mattered most to each other. They made time for their evening talks on the porch, even when they were exhausted from the demands of children and ranch work. They still looked at each other across a crowded room and felt that spark that had ignited in a ravine all those years ago. They still reached for each other in the night, their passion undimmed by time and familiarity. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1888, Cole surprised Clara with a trip to San Francisco, just the two of them while Cole's foreman and his wife watched the children. It was the first time they had been alone together for more than a few hours since William was born, and they reveled in the freedom and the chance to focus solely on each other. They stayed in a fine hotel, saw a play at the theater, and dined in elegant restaurants. But the best moments were the quiet ones in their hotel room, talking and laughing and making love without worrying about little ears overhearing or being interrupted by a crying baby. "I would do it all again," Clara said one night as they lay tangled together in the hotel bed. "Every moment, every struggle. If I had to fall into that ravine 1,000 times to end up here with you, I would do it gladly." Cole pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I thank God for that day," he said quietly. "Thank God I was passing by at just the right moment. Thank God I heard you scream. Everything good in my life started in that ravine with you." They returned to Chico renewed and reconnected, ready to dive back into the wonderful chaos of their family life. The children had been well behaved for the most part, according to the foreman's wife, though she admitted with a laugh that Margaret had organized a revolt against early bedtimes, and that James had somehow managed to get himself stuck in a tree and had to be rescued. The children were growing up strong and healthy. William, at 9 years old, was already showing promise as a cattleman, with an instinctive understanding of the animals and the land. Margaret, at 7, was at the top of her class in school and talked about becoming a doctor someday, a dream that both Clara and Cole encouraged despite the unconventionality of it. James, at 4, was all energy and mischief, keeping Clara constantly on her toes. And Catherine, just 2, was a sweet, sunny child who charmed everyone she met. In 1890, Clara discovered she was pregnant for the 5th time. She was 33 now, and this pregnancy was harder than the others had been. She was tired more easily, and Dr. Henderson, now in his late 60s but still practicing, cautioned her to take things easy. Cole was anxiously protective, hovering over Clara and insisting she rest, enlisting the older children's help to make sure their mother did not overdo it. Clara found it both touching and exasperating, but she knew his concern came from love, so she did her best to be patient with his fussing. In January of 1891, on a snowy evening, Clara gave birth to twin daughters. The pregnancy's difficulty made sense now. She had been carrying 2 babies. Emma Grace and Eleanor Jane were tiny but healthy, identical except for a small birthmark on Eleanor's left shoulder. Cole looked at his wife, who had just given him 2 more beautiful daughters, with such awe and love that it brought tears to her eyes. 5 children, he said, shaking his head in wonder as he held one tiny daughter in each arm. We have 5 incredible children and the most amazing woman in the world for their mother. How did I get so blessed? We are both blessed, Clara corrected, exhausted but happy. We have each other, and we have this beautiful family, and we have a good life. What more could anyone want? The twins added a new dimension of chaos to the household, but also doubled the joy. William and Margaret were old enough to be genuine helpers, and they took their responsibilities as the oldest seriously. James adored his baby sisters and would sit for hours making faces at them to elicit their gummy smiles. Catherine was fascinated by them and had to be gently discouraged from trying to pick them up and carry them around. As the twins grew, their distinct personalities emerged. Emma was quieter and more contemplative, happy to sit and play with her toys for long periods. Eleanor was more outgoing and adventurous, always getting into things and exploring her world with fearless determination. The ranch continued to thrive. With William's help now invaluable and Margaret showing surprising skill with the account books despite her young age, Cole and Clara had built something that would last beyond them. They had created not just a successful business but a legacy for their children. In 1895, when Clara turned 38 and Cole 43, they took stock of their lives. William was now 16 and already being courted by ranchers hoping to bring such a talented young man into their operations, though William had made it clear he intended to stay and eventually take over the family ranch. Margaret was 14 and still determined to be a doctor, studying advanced science and mathematics with a passion that amazed her teachers. James was 9 and showing signs of becoming a gifted horseman. Catherine was 7 and had inherited her mother's love of teaching, often organizing lessons for the twins. Emma and Eleanor, at 4, were bright, happy girls who were inseparable. "We did good," Cole said one evening as they sat on the porch, a ritual they had maintained through all the years. The children were finally in bed, and the ranch was quiet except for the normal night sounds of animals and wind. "We did very good," Clara agreed, leaning into his side. Her hair, still dark but now threaded with silver at the temples, was loose around her shoulders the way Cole loved it. His own hair was more gray than brown now, and there were lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, But Clara thought he was more handsome at 43 than he had been at 26. "You ever regret it?" Cole asked. "Marrying a cowboy and taking on this hard life instead of staying a respectable schoolteacher in town?" Clara turned to look at him, cupping his weathered face in her hands. "Not for one single second," she said fiercely. "Cole Brennan, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Falling into that ravine was the luckiest day of my life because it brought you to me. Every challenge we have faced together. Every joy has been doubled because I got to share it with you. I love you more today than I did when we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." Cole kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, pouring 17 years of love and devotion into it. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I love you, Clara Brennan," Cole said. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." The years continued to roll by, bringing changes and challenges, but also continued joy. William married a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch in 1899, and they built a house on the far end of the property. In 1901, he made Cole and Clara grandparents for the first time with the birth of a son they named Cole after his grandfather. Margaret achieved her dream, becoming one of the first female doctors in California after attending medical school in San Francisco. She returned to Chico to practice, serving the community with the same dedication and courage she had shown all her life. She married a fellow doctor, and they became partners in both life and practice. James took over the day-to-day running of the ranch as Cole began to slow down in his 60s, proving himself every bit as skilled as his father. He married a widow with 2 children of her own, and he welcomed them as his own with characteristic kindness. Catherine became a teacher as she had always wanted, taking over Clara's position at the school when Clara finally retired. She married the town's new minister, a young man with a passion for social justice that Clara's late father would have approved of. The twins, inseparable as always, both married in a double wedding in 1910. Emma married a rancher's son and settled nearby, while Alina married a businessman and moved to Sacramento. Though she visited often through it all, Cole and Clara remained the center of their family. Their home was the gathering place for Sunday dinners and holidays, filled with children and grandchildren, and eventually great-grandchildren. Cole, now silver-haired and moving a bit slower but still strong, would sit in his chair by the fire and tell stories of the old days to the youngest generation. Clara, her dark hair now completely white but her eyes still bright with intelligence and humor, would read poetry to anyone who would listen and dispense advice and love in equal measure. On a warm evening in May of 1918, 40 years after they had first met, Cole and Clara sat together on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Cole was 76 now, Clara 69, and while age had slowed them down, it had not diminished the love they felt for each other. "Do you remember that day?" Clara asked, though she knew he would understand what she meant. They had talked about it often over the years, the day that changed both their lives. "Every detail," Cole said, taking her hand in his. "I remember how scared you looked, but how brave you were. I remember thinking you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, even covered in dust and with your ankle broken. I remember knowing, even then, that you were going to be important to me." "I knew too," Clara admitted. "When you climbed down into that ravine to help me, I felt like I had been waiting for you my whole life. Everything before that moment was just preparation for when we would meet." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of their family grandchildren playing in the yard, their children's voices raised in laughter as they cleaned up from dinner. "No regrets?" Cole asked, as he had asked many times over the years. Not a single one, Clara replied, as she always did. You gave me everything, Cole. Love, family, adventure, purpose. You gave me a life beyond anything I could have imagined when I was a lonely schoolteacher in Chico. You gave me everything too, Cole said, his voice rough with emotion even after all these years. A home, a family, love, so much love. You made me into the man I wanted to be. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to appear, Clara leaned her head on Cole's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close as he had done for 4 decades. They sat together in the gathering dark, surrounded by the life they had built together, knowing that whatever time they had left would be spent exactly like this together, in love, and grateful for every moment. Their story had begun with a scream in a ravine, and a cowboy brave enough to climb down to help. It had grown into something neither of them could have predicted: a love that weathered every storm, a family that spanned generations, and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. From a moment of desperation and fear had come a lifetime of joy and love, proving that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. As they sat together under the stars, Cole pulled Clara closer and whispered, "I would do it all again, too. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, as long as it was with you." Clara smiled and pressed a kiss to his weathered cheek. "Always with you," she agreed, "in this life and whatever comes after." And there, on the porch of the home they had built together, surrounded by the land they had tamed and the family they had created, Cole and Clara Brennan sat hand in hand, 2 souls who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built a love that would echo through the ages. Their scream and his answer had become a love song that would be remembered by their descendants for generations to come, a testament to the power of courage, kindness, and the enduring strength of true love.